Hello everyone, my name's Oliver G. This is the Earful Tower podcast. I'm here to bring you to Paris, even if just for about half an hour a week. That's my job. That's what I'm going to do. And where usually I would do an interview with some kind of guest talking about their life in Paris, today it's not like that. Today it's about a street. And before we get into the street, I need to rewind. This is a story I'd been meaning to tell quite differently, but that story got frozen in time when the lockdown happened. And then, as I'm in lockdown myself, in quarantine in Paris, I got thinking about this story that I wanted to do, and I thought of the parallel, how it's also been frozen in time, and I thought it'd make a kind of cool podcast episode. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's the story of a Paris street in Montmarte that's been frozen in 1941 due to these pretty extraordinary circumstances. But for me to tell you that story with the help of some of the characters who are in it, then we need to rewind a little first. We need to start at the beginning. So something you should know about me is that I love an aimless walk in Paris. Now Parisians love doing that too. They've even invented a word for it, to flâner. Well, I wouldn't say to flâner, they just say flâner, which means to walk aimlessly essentially. And if you do that, if you're a person who likes to walk without any purpose, then you're a flâneur. Unless you're a woman, and then you're a flâneuse. Now, if flaneuring was an Olympic sport, I'd say that I'd finish up on the podium somewhere. I do it very regularly, especially in Montmartre, where I live. Now, I think that Montmartre is particularly good for walking around. A lot of people, I've even seen comments before on Facebook or Instagram, people who say Montmartre, ruined by tourists, too many touristy streets. And there are indeed some touristy streets with tourist traps on them. But when you've explored this suburb completely, as I have, then you'll know that it's perfectly possible to walk for hours without seeing any tourists. It's just about taking those back streets, winding streets, cobbled streets. That's what you need to do, and essentially avoid the main road that goes up towards the Sacré-Cœur, up in the middle of it all. It's called Rue Steinkerk. Avoid that one at all costs. Now, let's flash back 2 months ago. In fact, I know exactly. It's February 27th because I've got the pictures of it. I was doing one of my typical walks, and I was on the southern side of the hill, or the butte, as it's called in French, when I stumbled upon a pretty unusual sight. So I was on Rue Androuet, which is, I think a lot of you guys might know this street already, even if you don't know that you know it. If you've seen the movie Amélie, there's a lot of scenes where she pops into like a little sort of supermarket, a marketplace. She puts her hands in the grains. That sort of supermarket, I guess you'd call it, a mini market, that still exists, and it's on the corner of Rue Androuet. And some tourists kind of managed to find it, but it's not wildly popular. In fact, the guy that owns the place has these sort of faded pictures, newspaper clippings from whenever the movie came out. I think that's like 2001 or something. So, they haven't done much to preserve that, but I think I've heard rumors that he quite likes the attention that it brings, which makes sense. But anyway, that's Rue Androuet, and it's kind of a concept street. They have a lot of arty shops, a lot of street art painted on the walls that regularly changes, and it's really charming, nice little street. Kind of old school feeling. Recommend you walk it anyway. But when I went up there on February 27th, I saw this kind of unusual sight. Like I said, there were a lot of workers there building new facades, or what looked like new facades, on the old buildings that were already there. So there were kind of ladders everywhere. There were people painting, what do you call it? Painting, when they put up a movie poster and they paint it on the wall? They were kind of doing that. It's funny I used the word movie poster then, because I got the inkling that this might be a movie set that was being put up. So it was only on a few facades, maybe 2 or 3. And I'm looking at the pictures now. I should stop for a sec. I'm going to put all these pictures, there's about 100 of them, on the earfultower.com. So if you want to look while I'm talking, it'll probably help you understand it a little bit. Also, I put loads of them on Instagram. So there were signs coming up for like a cordonnerie, or one that said vêtements, like clothing. Those kind of things, like one said a liquor shop. But they were quite, it was in the early stages, so you couldn't really tell when it was said or what was coming. But it was certainly interesting, and I sort of bookmarked it for future viewing, and I was like, this is something I've got to come back. It looks like they're doing something big. And it's funny to look through my own pictures. I can see that almost every day I went back to keep a track on it and to see what was happening. I'll tell you as well, if you're ever in Paris and you see them putting those orange traffic cones down really close to parked cars, that's a sign that they're going to be making a movie there. And when they do that, it usually means that they're going to go big on it, because what they do is they put the traffic cones right next to the cars, and then as soon as one of the parked cars disappears, they come in there and they sort of seal it off so no more cars can park there. And what I've seen in my 5 years in Paris, when they do that, it usually means that they want empty streets, or that they want to park some kind of timeless old school cars there instead. So ding 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 in my brain, I'm thinking, we're going old for this movie. Where's it going to go? Where are we going to go from here? And it turned out that they weren't just doing the facades. They were actually getting the people who lived in the buildings or who worked in the buildings to totally go. And that was exactly what happened with Chelsea, an American woman who turned out to be an Eiffel Tower follower. I was posting all this to Instagram, and she got in contact. And she said she was directly affected by it all.
Early in the morning, there was a knock on our door because it's our business, but also we live there. I opened the door. It was a lady from the film company, and she said, "I called you yesterday. I hadn't heard back. I wanted to come and speak with you. We want to shoot this film, and we're interested in your spot." And that's how it all started.
Chelsea and her husband run a shop called Of Love and Alchemy, a concept store with provisions for modern wellness. The shop sits right on the corner of Rue Androuet and Rue Berthe. And it turned out that her shop would be the focal point of the movie. But she didn't know this yet, and I definitely didn't know. I was still trying to piece it all together during my daily visits to the set.
They contacted us again and they said, we want your place. It's perfect. Can we sit down and discuss the details? And then it went from there, and that's when we learned it was going to be a whole progression of the entire street.
So I keep coming back in the coming days, and I'm finding clues about where this might be going. Like they put up one shop front, just had the word corsets written in old letters with a sort of a navy blue background and golden finishing on it. And I was like, corset shops, they're not recent at all, right? So I'm sitting there looking at it. I'm seeing these guys are coming in each day, really making an effort to change the street. Where they've put paint down for where you park your car or park your scooter, or where they say the bike lane is? They had guys in with those massive, they were like torches, flame torches, burning them off. So I was thinking, okay, this is serious. A couple days later, I see that they've put up these old bulletin boards where they've pasted artwork and notices about things. For example, I'm looking at one of the pictures I took for a national lottery or, work and stuff like that. And at the bottom of one of them, it said 25th of May, 1941. And I was like, oh, here we go. This is occupied Paris now. We're talking about what looks like a World War II movie here. It was around this time that they started filling the shop windows with really intricate details from the 40s. So, for example, they'd built up a pharmacy, and in the window of the pharmacy, there were, there must have been 2 or 3 dozen boxes and bottles of all these different oils and, cures for various things in the old, I can only assume that it was original packaging, So in the liquor shop, which had just said liquor at the top before, they'd started putting in all these old bottles, they'd put in curtains, they'd built these facades over the old shops that were, real estate agents or coffee shops. They'd all turned into, shops from the olden days. So we even had a hat shop. And the hat shop, they started putting all these old hats in on these displays in the window. The corset shop started getting these old corsets in. And every day as I revisited, I realized that they were turning the entire street into 1941.
It was awesome. We actually, to be honest, we were kind of stunned. We knew based on our meetings that they had told us what was going to happen, but we had no idea the caliber of their designs and what a transformation it was going to be. It was truly a work of art. And until you see it, you don't have a concept in your mind of how they're going to do that. And it was like stepping back in time. It was incredible.
Chelsea was right. It was unbelievable to see. And every day it got better. Every day there was just more detail coming in, fascinating detail. And by the time they started rolling in 1930s cars, I almost couldn't handle it anymore. It was like stepping into a time portal, like a real one, not like a telephone one like last week's episode with Ernest Hemingway. This felt like just hundreds of meters from my house, I was in the 1940s Paris. It was incredible. Anyway, I made a nearby coffee shop my regular haunt. Big shout out to Farfaloo. new coffee shop up there. And I was in there every day, keeping an eye on how the street was changing. The staff there told me that they'd learned the name of the movie. It was called Adieu, Monsieur Halfman, or Adieu, Monsieur Halfman, if you want to Google it yourself. I looked it up online and I found a synopsis. I'll read it to you. Paris, 1942. François Mercier is an ordinary man who aspires to start a family with the woman he loves, Blanche. He's also the employee of a talented jeweler, Mr. Halfman. But faced with the German occupation, the two men will have no other choice but to conclude an agreement whose consequences, over the months, will upset the fate of our three characters. And there's a reason it's written like that. It turns out that it is or was a popular stage play in Paris, and so they're adapting that stage play onto the big screen. Lucky for us. So it turned out that Chelsea's shop of Love and Alchemy was absolutely the focal point of the movie, because that's what would be the jewelry shop in which a lot of the movie was set.
There's just such a connection there between he was not French, neither are we. He was a jewelry designer, as am I. There was a kinship there that obviously connects us to that, and to see our space be totally transformed in just to another space and time was incredible.
Eventually, it was time to start filming, and that's when it looked its absolute best. Let me tell you, outside they had there's a shop that was like a second-hand shop, a brocante, like antique bric-a-brac, and out the front of it they put all these kind of antique stuff. They brought in old bicycles, they brought in old trucks, cars, parked them in the street, and there were old wheelbarrows lying around. There was one guy that had gone around, so after they'd plastered all the stuff on the walls and changed all the facades, there was a guy who came in with like dirty water and made it look like all these signs and shop fronts had been there for 20 years, because you can't just build a new corset shop. Everything had to look like it was just a regular street. So they put so much effort into it, and it was fantastic to see. But when they started filming and they brought in all the extras as well, that was when it got really cool. I mean, there must have been about 50 people dressed up in 1940s clothing walking around, and not to mention the soldiers, the Nazi soldiers, with extreme attention to detail. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I did sneak onto the set a few times. They had security at each of the corner of this kind of T-junction, but it was quite easy to just walk in. They let the residents come in every 15 minutes or so after they said cut or coupe in French, and sometimes I'd just sneak in there and get some pictures, which is what you're probably seeing on the earfultower.com as we're talking. Speaking of the extras, it actually crossed my mind to sign up as an extra. A figurant is the word in French, but it was a lot of work and involved going out into the suburbs, and I thought, I'll just tell my own version of the story. But that takes us to the next part of this story.
Et action figuration. Et action.
So one day I snuck on the set and walked among all the old cars, and sitting inside of them was a man dressed up as a Nazi. The attention to detail was astonishing. It was almost frightening to see him actually sitting there in an old car like it was just a totally normal day in occupied Paris. I got talking to him and he said that his name was Jean, and he was a German-speaking French actor. And I asked if he'd chat with me for the podcast. He said yes, but that we'd have to keep our voices down and walk away from the set. Now this is pretty chilling. You can hear us whispering because obviously we didn't want to disturb what's happening behind us, but you can also hear the click-clacking of his Nazi boots. And just before I start, please be aware, I'm not trying to glorify Nazis in any way here. This is just the only guy who I spoke to in a movie that happened to be about Nazis and the World War II. And he was a really lovely guy, but still, this is a bit creepy with the sound of the boots on the cobblestones. So the reason that we're whispering as we're walking is because they're filming, 50 meters behind us right now. Mm-hmm. And wow, listen to those boots. I'm going to record it.
This is because I am a simple soldier, and this is in order to make a lot of noise when we do patrol. Everyone in rhythm. I guess.
Wow. So we can stop here, I think. Yeah. Now we're 100 meters away. But what's it like? You live in Paris for 2 years. Do you think it's cool to see the city transformed into?
Did you see the stage?
Yeah,
the set.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's done for in the 40s.
It's incredible.
So, you really feel yet when they are walking with all the extras, you see how they are clothed and what they, in every detail, what they carry, how they talk, how they smoke. It feels a bit like it, yeah.
So they're paying close attention to how everyone is acting and smoking and walking?
Not necessarily how one is acting, but in detail how one is dressed and how, the detail.
And do you get to speak in the movie, or?
Not yet, but maybe. I hope so.
And your job is like driving the old car?
Yeah, I drive the old car of the officer. I am the personal driver of the officer who comes to the jewel store, to buy a ring. And after he bought his ring, he comes back towards the car. I open the door, I close the door, I go to my seat, and I drive the car.
Amazing.
That's my job today.
We were interrupted by some women who wanted to take photos of him, and then he got called back to the set, so that's where the interview ended, unfortunately. But I took a few more pictures of the set. I got some of him as well, and I kept visiting in the coming days as they brought more and more of these old, unusual vehicles to the set. Both like sort of old school cars that would have been in Paris anyway, but some sort of army vehicles too. So odd to see them parked around Paris, but fascinating too. The movie filming was continually delayed by rain, and it meant that the street stayed exactly like it was 1941 or maybe 1942 for far longer than they ever imagined. In fact, some people have been saying that by the time the lockdown hit France, the crew had already broken the record for a film set staying in one place on one street in Paris, because they'd already been there for, it must have been 2 weeks, right? But here's where it gets really eerie. Before they even finished the filming, France was put under a total lockdown because of the virus, of course. So any work that isn't absolutely essential is banned. And that means the film crew weren't even allowed to remove the set. Chelsea, who you've heard from before, and many others still can't return to their homes because they're frozen as movie sets. She's been relocated to a nearby Airbnb, but her house and her place of work is full of the gear from the film, and they can't come and retrieve it. As for the street, Rue Androuet, well, it hasn't changed at all, really. I mean, they've removed the window displays of the corsets and the pill bottles and the jewelry, but the rest of the street is totally frozen in the early 1940s. It's pretty weird. Some of the military posters are in tatters on the wall. The shop facades still promote shoe repairs, a mirror maker, a haberdasher, and the streets are practically empty except for the people doing exercise or essential shopping or visiting the pharmacy. Weirder still, in Montmarte especially, there's lots of police around right now. They're on patrols, they're on bikes, in cars, I've seen them on horses, and especially on foot. And they're checking people's papers to make sure they have the right permission forms to be outside. And I was out recently checking out this movie set on a walk of my own, and when I turned the corner I saw 4 police officers coming towards me, and it was really weird. It made me shudder to think about the dark past of Paris in the 1940s. Really creepy stuff. Now, I've got no idea what kind of film we're in for, in terms of Adieu, Monsieur Hoffman, remember? But it's scheduled to come out in 2021, assuming they got what they needed and they can edit it. I'm looking forward to seeing it, but remember, if you want to see more for now, go and find pictures that I've taken on the Eiffel Tower on Facebook, Instagram, or theeiffeltower.com, where I've uploaded about 100 photos of the set. Anyway, that'll do for now. I just wanted to take you down a little interesting street in Montmartre. I think it's time that we change subject to something a little brighter, perhaps. And I'm going to read out questions that came in from you listeners who supported the Kickstarter for my new book, Paris on Air. Remember, you can still get a copy of it if you go on theeiffeltower.com/memoir. But here we go. Valerie says, Oliver, when will you be on ABC Radio overnights again? An Australian listener. So one of the main radio stations, in fact, the main radio station in Australia, ABC, they have an overnights program, and the host, Rod Quinn, calls me up every now and again just to see what's going on in Paris, and I never know when he's going to call me. He just says, hey, you want to talk tonight? I say, yeah, whenever you want, Rod. So I can't answer that one, Valerie, but I'm glad that you've heard it before. I always wonder who's listening to that, because I guess it means you're up in the middle of the night, huh? Anyway, I'll let you know. I'll tweet it out or something. Now, Kathy Barry says, thank you for a wonderful introduction to Paris. Love listening to you. Well, thanks very much. What else have we got? Cara Black. Now imagine this, an author author Cara Black, who's a friend of the show, been on it a bunch of times and writes the Murder in Paris series. She said that I should give a shout out to her new book, so I'll do it. She is excited that her book 3 Hours in Paris, a historical thriller set in June 1940, is out now. That's kind of weird. I'm just going through these randomly. I had no idea that I'd be coming with an email from Cara Black about a historical thriller in 1940. Very apt. Check her out, Cara Black, friend of the show and a friend of mine. Now, Tammy, she's from Bristol, Rhode Island, and she says, it's a pretty simple message here, she says, be kind to animals and each other. You're exactly right, Tammy. Melanie in California wonders, how do you find time to manage all you do for your earful business? Well, it's pretty easy because it's like a full-time job. So I just put all my time into it. I spent a lot of time thinking about it too. Like that Hemingway episode that you heard last week, little inside word here on that. I'd planned to do it as a live video at midnight where I'd bump into Hemingway. And I'd been thinking about it and talking with my Hemingway for ages, trying to sort it out. And then everything went into lockdown. So I think a lot. And maybe that's what makes it look like I do a lot. Or maybe I do a lot. I don't know. But yeah, I'm happy to do it in any case. Now, Fabian, who's in the book, he says, name 2 things you would have on your program if you were to run for Paris City Hall. Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a good question, but I would never run for Paris City Hall. But I'd probably do similar things to make it more of a... You know, at the start of the episode I talked about liking to walk a lot. The current mayor, Anne Hidalgo, does all kinds of things to make the city greener and more cycle-friendly and walk-friendly. I'd do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, you know what else I'd do? This would never make me mayor, but I'd do it anyway, is I'd put up more signs about the Philippe Auguste Wall and make it into a tourist site. Because those kind of things need to be shared, I think. I'd never become mayor, would I? Now, Amy, she says, hello to my family, Jim, Jamie, Megan, Chase, Dean, Adam, Jenna, and Abby. Well, there you go, Amy Keeney and the family. Hope you're all listening. We've got time for one more, I think. It's Will Quicko, who says, thank you for bringing Paris to me every morning on my daily commute. Best of luck to you. I wonder if you still have a daily commute, Will, or if you're also in lockdown like I am. I've just seen one more that I'm going to end on because it's actually perfect. It's from Scott in LA. And he says, Oliver, if you could time travel and live in Paris at any time in the past, what year would you choose and why? I definitely wouldn't choose the Nazi occupation, as interesting as it seemed to be. But fitting question to end this episode. And I suppose the answer would have to be, I think it would be when, I guess it was the 20s. Just a bit earlier, when all the creative people were hanging around. I really like the idea that, when I'm saying creative people, I mean like all the Picasso and Hemingway and all those kind of people. Because I think I really like the idea of the creatives hanging out. And I try and surround myself with creative people in Paris today, but I'm learning that not all of them like hanging out, Kind of weird. Some of the most creative people in Paris are sort of recluses, or aren't very social, which is a shame. I think it'd be really cool if a bunch of us were sharing ideas and talking. But yeah, well, let's say 1920. How about that? At least the 20s. But thanks for that question, and thanks for supporting the book. Scott, I'm going to wind it up there. For all you guys who enjoy this episode, there's plenty more like it. You've got about 200 episodes to choose from if you're new around here. If you've been around for a while and you haven't got the book yet, theearfultower.com/memoir, and support this work on patreon.com/The Earful Tower for lots of bonuses and hours of extra videos and podcasts. Thank you for listening. I'll see you again very soon, and have a lovely week.
I don't really know where we are. I just wanna look at